all that came up was natural gas. And at that point, there was no market for gas. In fact, it'd be decades and decades before there'd be any market for gas. And so it was deemed a useless field, and went on it, just ignored it. Shortly thereafter, bought by Standard Oil Company, the California company. And then some local Rock Springs folks, the Hayes, Leonard Hay, kind of got involved, picked up some leases, again would drill a little bit of oil, but it was always deemed unsuccessful because of natural gas. Then finally, in the late 60s, they started looking at it again for natural gas, and the big company at that point was El Paso Gas Company out of Texas. And they wanted to drill it, but they found that it was very unsuccessful because the traditional fracking techniques at that point did not work, which was to have basically almost all water, use just exclusively water, and it wouldn't break the hard granite rock to bring the gas up to the surface. So they decided that they need to be coming up with a new way to frack, and they came up with a real new way to frack, and it was part of the U.S. government's Plowshare program, which was in partnership with the Atomic Energy Commission at that time, and they were going to use 5 sequentially set off nuclear bombs to try to frack the gas. And fortunately, they never did do that. Actually, the project is still on the books. I don't know if you know that. It just was never funded. So we're kind of thankful that they didn't, because in the other places of the country that they did frack with nuclear energy, what they discovered is that it was so hot that it actually melted and created a glass, and then created a whole nother problem, so that it was deemed unsuccessful. And the reason they were going to do 5 in a row is because then each bomb would have only been 100 kiloton or something, so it would have been 500 total, 50 times the size of the bombs we dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But it would have kept us in compliance with the size of bomb we can set off in the world, which was only 150, because we were doing just 100 at a time. Anyway, so then it was then again laid fallow. This was not working, that wasn't funded. And there was a man at that point over in Casper, his name was Neil McMurray, and he said, you know, we've got to be able to come up with another way to frack successfully on this field. And so he was barely graduated from high school, recognized what he needed was some people that were smarter than him. So he went and interviewed as many different physicists and different chemists, and found James Shaw and hired him and some other people to help come up with a way to successfully frack this area. In the meantime, he was going to all the BLM. At that point, they were quarterly meetings to pick up leases, and you would put in for a lease. And he said 95% of the time I was the only one that would show up at these lease sales, and I would bid $2 for a lease because that was the minimum bid. And he would pick up, he said, I would pick up as many leases as I could. If I had $20 that day, I'd get 10 of them. If I had $100, I'd get 50. Well, pretty soon he's got several thousand of them, most 90% at $2 a bid. And I spoke to people who said he was an idiot. What is this bridge builder buying those leases out in that field that's clearly been proven to not work? Well, I think the laugh was on them. He hired somebody, and he successfully fracked the Jonah Field. It might be interesting to know, I said, how'd you come up with the name Jonah? And in my book, I've got their original map, and they were trying to decide if they should frack over here where it says Jonah Gulch or frack over here where it says Horse Butte. And they stayed up all night long arguing. At the very end, Jonah won, and it was this close to being called the Horse Butte Field. So, anyway, the rest is history. He successfully drilled. He had hoped for 1 million cubic feet a day. He got about it just more than doubled his expectations. Pretty soon he said it got to be too much to keep expanding, so he looked for another buyer, and he said, so I found some Canadians that would buy it, and those Canadians then eventually were Encana. So then you guys came in directly because of the McMurray. So.